forget the power, again, the power of stories. And this is obviously God's MO.
Yeah.
You know, he's the greatest storyteller of all kind. That is so different from the kind of street corner preaching we often associate with evangelization or proselytizing, you know. I would say in some ways you got to ask yourself the question, like, how much do you really have to hate people to not evangelize them?
Yeah.
And then to not evangelize them well.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't wrap your story into that, if you don't learn how to tell the story of God's love for you, forget about it. There's no chance, you know. I think artists, songwriters, authors do this very, very naturally. What does it look like for us? Kind of the everyday person out there on planet Earth. What do you think?
I have a really funny story, actually.
Let's hear it.
This literally happened yesterday.
What'd you think of Michael D. O'Brien? Are you becoming more convinced?
I'm sitting here thinking I want to read the entire series.
Oh my gosh,
tomorrow.
It's so good.
Yeah.
How was my rereading?
It was beautiful.
Not bad. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this happened to me literally yesterday. So we just talked about CrossFit. I have been going to CrossFit, and I love CrossFit. And one of my coaches, he always has us do these like icebreaker things during a warm-up. So he'll like ask us a question, and he asked what's your favorite holiday tradition. And I'm sitting there thinking like, I want to say it's Christmas Mass, but like no one here like knows that I'm like Christian or religious. Like I don't want to like be weird. I don't know. I'm really wrestling with this. He finally gets to me, and I just said like, oh, I really like my church service I go to at Christmas. And he's like, oh, really? Like, when do you normally go? And I kind of was like, midnight. And he was like, oh, midnight mass, really cool. And then not even 10 minutes later, he's asking me like, do you ever wonder like what forever means? Like sometimes I freak out because I'm like, what if after I die, I have an eternal soul? Like he's suddenly asking me all these like really, really deep questions because, I mean, at this point, he knew I was a Catholic.
Yeah.
At this point, he knew that I, like, cared about these things. And I don't know if he had anyone else in his life that he felt like he could talk to about these things. Yeah. And it was crazy because, I mean, I honestly didn't really say much to him. I just, like, told him my experience, told him a little bit of my story, like, why I'm not afraid of forever. And, but when I sin, I am, because I know I need redemption, and explaining this to him. And it was like this incredible conversation that really just, like, I definitely didn't initiate it, but it just came from like me just like being honest about my own life.
I love this. Why I'm not afraid of forever.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, this is obviously the power of a testimony, you know, the power of a life well lived and then, you know, articulated to the best of our ability. But it comes with like tremendous drama.
Yeah. And
ups and downs.
People, like, the other thing too is you have no idea what when you're living your life in an authentically holy way, like people notice and people want that. And I'm sure this priest, it wasn't just what he said, but the way he lived his life. And yeah, I have another story too, if that's okay.
Let me hear it in a second, because I think what you now just tapped back into is this need for integrity.
Yes,
so that
absolutely.
The word that you proclaim is the word that you live. In the case of Jesus, it was also the word that he was, right? The word spoke. The word who was the word spoke a word, and that word was eternal life, and it was salvation, and it was the Father's love. So like in Jesus, there was this radical integrity. Yeah. Like that's why he spoke with authority, and people were astonished. They would marvel at his words. I do think that if he was serious about saying we could do even greater things, that's some of the greater things he's calling us to, is to let our witness and therefore our words captivate, convict, proclaim, right? Yeah. So that the world is yet again brought to their knees before the miracle of God among us, of God's salvation in his son, Jesus, you know? This is, again, the power of evangelization through story.